This is TWiT.
What a year and what a quarter for Apple.
Yeah, what a year, what a quarter. But I think the most impressive thing, Leo, is the fact that Apple stock is still rising on the news. Very often, a company will put out record earnings, record revenues, and the stock will fall because Wall Street starts to get worried about the fact that there's no way to maintain that momentum. In this case, shares are actually up today. Last I saw, maybe about 3%, 2.5% on Wall Street, nearing a 52-week high for Apple. And basically, Wall Street is saying, not only do we like the current quarter, but we love Apple's outlook. Now, here to give us some more perspective on the earnings and where Apple is going is ZDNet's Larry Dignan. Larry, you around for us?
Yeah, I'm here. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Larry. Hey, now, once you saw the earnings, what were your immediate reactions?
Well, the immediate one was the thing everybody looked at, which was like, holy iPhone, Batman.
Yeah.
They moved a lot of units. They're going to move a lot more. And then once China comes online, you know, that thing's a juggernaut for sure. But the main thing that stuck out for me is just the Mac sales.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that the desktop and laptops business is not dead?
Yeah, and in terms of units, they were up 21% from a year ago. In terms of revenue, they were up 18%. Back to school was really strong for them, which isn't all that surprising. I mean, you go to any college, it's all Apple everywhere.
Yeah.
But the thing that was most notable for me as far as the future goes is, you know, they also said Mac sales were strong in emerging markets. And there were a few things that stuck out for me there. One was, emerging markets count for like a quarter of Apple sales now. Obviously, there's a lot of growth there. The other important part about the emerging markets is that they're mobile-first areas, right? So you really have kind of a greenfield for that halo effect that Apple talks about. These are people who are buying iPhones, iPads, and they're obviously looking at Macs. And the historical argument for Mac or against Mac is that Macs are expensive, right? If you look at the new iMac, the big screen one, you know, it plays true to script. But, you know, MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs are selling well in emerging markets. And I don't know if that means they're viewed more as a luxury good or that the price is right. I mean, the MacBook Air is not terribly expensive. But if Larry, they can ride that market, it's all good.
Larry, I was going to ask, does this actually mean that Apple is growing its market share versus the PC, or are sales just rising across the board in the PC and Mac market, and rising tides lift all boats?
Well, if you look at PC growth overall, I mean, you get to like 2% growth, and we're all doing cartwheels because the market's not collapsing anymore. So the Mac is outpacing the PC industry by a wide margin, and I think they said that they have the most market share since 1995 in terms of the Mac.
That's right, but it's still single digit. I mean, it's not a big player when you compare it to all those Windows machines out there.
Oh, not at all. But it's also the same. It's the same argument with Android and iOS, right? iOS isn't the market share leader, but they make a lot of dough.
Yeah, Apple doesn't really need to be number one in market share as long as they're number one in profit, and sales are growing.
Right. But I think the thing that also sticks out for me in Mac is, you know, you look at, I think if anybody went back in time 6 years ago and said, all right, which unit is going to be part of the other category? Like what product category is going to become irrelevant to Apple? Most of us will probably look at the Mac. And instead, the iPods go into the other revenue category, right? So, you know, I mean, for Mac, you got to give Mac props just for longevity in a lot of ways. And I think once they knit OS 10 or OS X with iOS, and, you know, because already the look and feel is starting to blend together, and they're doing a lot more things to sort of create connective tissue between those operating systems. I mean, I think, you know, Mac and iPhone sales may go hand in hand. And if that's the case, Apple's going to have you know, it won't be a market share killer, but it's certainly going to be it's going to be a very profitable, nice business.
If there was a negative in the results this quarter, of course, it was this third down quarter for the iPad. Tim Cook was at great pains in the analyst call to say, no, I'm still bullish on the iPad, and partly because of the growth in emerging markets.
Yeah, well, I think the iPad story is an emerging markets thing, but I think the real thing for the iPad is it's a corporate thing. I mean, I don't think we're going to look at. I still look at the like when I travel, the tablet's the first thing that gets voted off the island.
Right.
It gets voted off the backpack.
Right.
And I need a laptop for work. Obviously need the smartphone, and then I'll pack a Kindle to read. But the tablet's what gets booted, so it's like a tweener kind of thing. But I think in corporations, it'll wind up replacing a laptop for a lot of workers.
Tim also said, Cook also said, it's a new product category, so we don't know what the turnover rate is. We know phones are every other year, PCs maybe every 4 years, but we don't yet know how fast people need a new iPad. And I think part of the sales drop is saturation. Everybody's got an iPad, and they're not rushing to market every year to get a new one.
Yeah, well, I think it's saturation. I think it's also the tablets are built pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not like they don't implode.
Yeah, you don't need a new one.
I am the poster child for this conversation. When the iPad came out, we bought two, one for me, one for the family. And just last week, I finally got the iPhone 6 Plus, and I still have those two original iPads. They're workhorses. They're fine. I love reading on them. But to Larry's point, they're not coming on business trips with me anymore. I've got my iPhone with the massive screen, and I've got my MacBook.
I think it's interesting, though, Larry, that you feel like business might turn its back on say the Surface and Windows tablets and buy iPads instead?
Well, I think in the enterprise, the device conversation is going to depend on what do you need, right? So if I'm on the sales floor, unless I have Windows apps in the background that somehow you need Surface, the iPad or a cheap Android one is probably going to be fine. Right, but I mean, I see more iPads in the field now as cash registers and kiosks, than ever, right? And part of that's, and I imagine Apple Pay may accelerate that. But for now, I mean, Square's enabled a lot of iPads in the field, and I just, with the deal with IBM, I mean, I think that's ultimately where Apple's going to get its volume for the iPad. I mean, I don't think the iPad's dead, but I do see it much more as a business tool than necessarily some personal device that you have some form of intimacy with, because I think that'll be reserved for your phone, which increasingly has a big ass screen attached to it.
I'm flashing back to the Windows 10 announcement in San Francisco, and that was all enterprise focused. You almost wonder when Microsoft did that announcement, the Windows 10 announcement, if they did it because they were scared of this very phenomenon you're talking about, Larry, and also the fact that Apple's working with IBM. It's almost like Microsoft knows it has a stronghold in the enterprise, but they're really worried about this this mobile Apple phenomenon chipping away at that empire.
Well, I think they're worried about it a little, but I mean, I think the reality is Microsoft is an enterprise company. You look at who's carrying the team; it's Windows Server, it's Azure, Dynamics. It's there's all this. I mean, we look at Surface and Lumia and Windows Phone, but the reality is they're dominant in the enterprise, and that's what brings home all the money. So I think Microsoft has two ways to play it. One, obviously, they want to be a device player, and they want to be that endpoint. But I think the game for Microsoft is managing those endpoints, right? Mm-hmm. So Microsoft could be perfectly happy with their enterprise mobility suite, managing a bunch of iPhones and BlackBerries and Android devices, and maybe a few Windows Phone devices too. But I think the game is to control the data, secure the data, and manage those devices and applications much more than the device itself.